Hey guys, Michelle Pop here, and I am known as a food storage and especially a freezer cooking specialist. So that's actually what I'm here to talk to you about today is freezing your garden produce. I want to make sure you know I have an entire course built out on this as well as a website. So you can definitely check out the course, check out the website. You can go get on my email list for more information and updates as well. And with that, you'll get a freezer inventory sheet, which we'll talk about later on. So what I want to go through today is the Bountiful Kitchen Lifestyle Method. So you want to, when you're deciding what you're going to freeze and how you're going to freeze it, you're going to do first a self-assessment, then decide like how you want to store and preserve stuff, and then make sure that you're serving and rotating through your food. So one of the first things you want to ask yourself with the self-assessment is, am I looking for short, medium, or long-term storage? And this is really, really important because there's some steps that you have to take if it's longer storage that you can skip if it's shorter term, if you're going to use it in a few weeks, maybe even a few months. You also need to make sure that you're considering your family's preferences, so that you're preparing stuff in a way that you're going to use. That might be maybe you guys like corn on the cob, so you're going to freeze the whole cobs of corn as compared to shucking it because you like to just use corn in recipes. And then you also want to really give some thought to portion sizes. So if you have a smaller family like me right now, it's myself and a toddler, I'm not going to freeze the same large portion that I would if I was cooking for 4 or 6 people every single day. So your portion sizes are really important too. So when it comes to blanching, blanching is a method to stop the enzymes in your food before you freeze it. And this is part of why you need to do your self-assessment, because if you're going to use something quickly, you don't have to blanch it first. But if it's going to stay in the freezer longer, you're going to get a lot better quality if you do blanch. So really consider what your end goal is. Along with that, again, we're back to the portion sizes. So when you're freezing stuff, make sure that you're portioning it to a size that you want to use, and then start now. Literally now, like it is, I just had to check the date. It's the beginning of May right now. It is 2 weeks before my average last frost, which means I'm not planting much in my garden yet. There's very little that can go in, but I've already started harvesting and preserving this year's harvest. So I'm going to I started with my chives, my perennials. Those are going to be the first thing. And those can go in the freezer, and then you can just cut them up later, or you could freeze them in oil if you're going to use them in recipes. You could freeze them in a broth, however you're going to benefit from them later on. Another easy to freeze item in the beginning of spring like this is rhubarb. So again, I think about how I'm going to use it. So maybe I want to chop it up so I can, and then I'll put it on a cookie sheet and freeze it flat. Then I can put it in freezer bags and I can pour out as much as I want when it's time to bake a recipe. Or I like to do a syrup. A rhubarb syrup is one of my favorite things. So I can make a bunch of that and freeze it ahead. I add that to lemonade. I add it to water kefir. So think about what you're going to use. Another thing that I love with rhubarb is to actually turn it into barbecue sauce. It doesn't do that great in the crock pot. It looks kind of a funny color, but it's phenomenal for grilling and cooking in the oven. Spinach is another one that you can freeze right away that you'll want to cook down a little bit. Blanching is probably easiest, and then you can store that. When it comes to like your summer stuff, tomatoes freeze phenomenally well. And one of the biggest benefits of freezing tomatoes is that you're going to get, when you pull it out, you can just run it under hot water and the skin comes off really easily, and then you don't have to mess around with boiling it to peel the skin off. It's really, really simple to just peel the skin off with your fingers. And you can also then take a serrated knife, and you don't have to thaw them. You can cut them and cook them just the way that they are. So that's tomatoes. If you do broccoli and cauliflower, that's something you'll want to portion down. Again, I like to freeze stuff like that on cookie sheets. I'm going to cut it into like bite-sized pieces, and then I freeze it on a cookie sheet. And this might be a game changer for you. Get ready to have your mind blown. You can take your frozen broccoli, cauliflower, and other similar vegetables and roast them from frozen. So you can put them in the oven from frozen and roast them just the same as you would with fresh vegetables. So you still get that like nice crispness, and you can also put them on the grill. Use like a cast iron pan or whatever it is that you prefer to use on your grill. And then I cover them with foil and leave the foil on and let the bottom get a bit of a char. So I'll give them a good like 5-7 minutes or so on a medium heat, maybe a little bit longer depending how big your pieces are, and then come and turn them over, keep them covered with foil if they're still cold in the center, and you get that nice grilled vegetable char, and you can prep everything ahead so you don't have to chop vegetables when you're ready to go and grill stuff. What else? So like beans, things like beans and peas, you can freeze easily. I find I like the texture of them better when they're frozen than when they're canned. Kale freezes really well. If you like beets, that's something that you can slice up and freeze. You can also, over the course of the season, take the smaller, more tender leaves from your beets as you're kind of, you might thin out your patch, but you can also thin out the individual leaves and just stack them on top of each other in a freezer bag, and you can freeze them that way. When you go to cook them, just add, I like to boil them in water with a little bit of vinegar, and the vinegar really changes the flavor and makes it a lot better. In my opinion, better. I'm not the biggest beet lover. Don't tell my Ukrainian neighbors that I don't like beets very much. But I've definitely learned to appreciate them more since learning to cook them with vinegar. It makes a huge change. So a lot of things like that, like you can do kale and put the whole leaf right in the freezer and break it off even from frozen when you're ready to cook with it. Carrots are something you'll probably want to blanch ahead. And so you can really just look at anything that you would freeze out of your garden or any of the vegetables that you enjoy, and portion them down for freezing is a really simple way to store them. Potatoes is another one. Where I live, I'm in Alberta. Potatoes grow like crazy. Like they're so easy to grow and everyone has them. And so what I like to do with potatoes is I'll leave them in the fall when I'm harvesting everything else in the garden and it's busy, and wait until, early winter that, that first snow hits, and that's a better time to start peeling them. I can chop them up and blanch them. You can freeze them as mashed potatoes. I find that mashed potatoes do better if you have a waxy potato, like your red, like a Kenbeck, something like that, or red Pontiac, those sort of potatoes. If you're using a russet, that makes a better baked potato. So go ahead and bake it first, slice it up. You can do twice baked if you want to add some cheese and vegetables or whatever you like in there, and then freeze those, and those are easy to pop back in the oven. I also will do French fries and hash browns, and with all of that, anytime that I'm using potatoes, I blanch them first. Please, people, blanch your potatoes, because otherwise they can turn a bit black and gross, and they're just not as lovely, and all your hard work kind of goes to waste. So blanch your potatoes. Yeah, that's the majority of your vegetables you can do this way. You can also then do, if you want to do like a late start to your planting, stuff that you're going to put in late summer, early fall, that is more cold hardy, then you can do that after the first frost is still coming in. You can still have your vegetables like kale, and broccoli, cauliflower, Brussels sprouts. You can definitely grow until the first harvest. Here in Canada, it's early October is Canadian Thanksgiving, and so I'll often go in the garden in October, even though there's ice on the ground and snow, and that's when I will pick my Brussels sprouts, and whatever I don't use, I can blanch and freeze. Um, yeah, so the other key is you're portioning all of this stuff down, you're freezing everything. You really want to make sure that you add it to your freezer inventory chart. If you don't have a freezer inventory chart, you can get one on my website, and I highly recommend it. It's really easy to open the fridge and look around and see what you have. It's pretty darn easy to open the pantry and look and move stuff around. But I find that when stuff is in the freezer and it gets buried and it's cold and your fingers are cold, you don't dig down to the bottom nearly as often. So it really does help to have a freezer inventory. And I just do mine. I write down what I have, and I have little boxes, and I put one slash through it to say I have one of these or one of that portion. Maybe it's 1 cup of corn. And when I use that 1 cup, I put a slash the other way and make an X through it. I don't cross it all off. I just make that X. And then I know that I've had however much and I used it, as compared to crossing it off and I don't know what it's there. So when I go to plan my garden or my shopping for the next year and I'm planning what I'm going to harvest and what I'm going to preserve, I can go back and look at that inventory sheet and go, oh man, I froze 10 cups of corn last year and I used all 10 of them. I can do 10 or more this coming year, and I know that I'm likely to use it, as compared to just guessing at how much we went through in a year. So again, I highly recommend your freezer inventory. Also, when you're freezing stuff, make sure that you're using a good freezer quality container. The absolute easiest is to just put stuff in freezer bags. Again, you're going to go back to that self-assessment. Are you looking for a short, medium-term storage? Then your freezer bag's perfectly fine, or like a glass container with a lid. However, if you're looking for longer term storage, maybe a full year or even longer than that in your freezer, then you really want to consider like vacuum sealing, so that you have less air in there, there's less moisture. You're going to have a higher quality product when you do bring it out of the freezer. So the other thing I really want you to know is that when you are freezing food, you can still take that out of the freezer later and preserve it in other ways. You can freeze something now and then bring it out later, and you could still dehydrate it. You could bring it out later and still can it, like the example of tomatoes. Well, maybe in August when all my tomatoes come in, especially here where I live, the average last frost is like the first week or so of September. By the end of August, most people have ripped their gardens out entirely. So we have quite a short season. It's the end of May 20th to the end of August. So we do have long days. You can actually get a surprising amount of food out of a northern garden, a cold climate garden. But because everything comes in August can get really hectic when you're trying to preserve things. So if it's something that I can throw in the freezer now, like the tomatoes, and then I could go back in September or October or even later in the year and pull those out and either cook with them fresh, or I could do something like make salsa and can it. I could, if I'm using like the Roma tomatoes, I could roast them and make a homemade tomato paste, like with garlic. Roasted tomatoes, olive oil, roasted garlic, and maybe throw in some onions and then puree all of that. That makes a really phenomenal tomato paste. So those are just some ideas to get you started. Again, start freezing, start harvesting as soon as you possibly can. I want to tell you a story about a friend of mine. She is probably 40 years older than me. Like she's my adopted Canadian mom. I love her. Okay. And one year we were talking about our gardens, and she says, I never really have gotten to enjoy the harvest, like out of my garden or in life. And she asked if I knew what she meant. And I'm like, sorry, no, I don't. Because that's just not my life philosophy. Like when it comes to gardening, when it comes to food storage, when it comes to life, that's just not, I don't work from there. I work from the harvest starts now. I'm enjoying the fruits of my labor now. I planted perennials last year. I already planted chives. They're high enough, they're tall enough that I've already harvested them. And it's 2 weeks before my average last frost, and I haven't even planted the majority of my garden. Like I harvest my entire season and I enjoy that harvest the entire season. And that's also how I approach life. So I really want you guys to think about that, like as you're gardening and as you're looking at your efforts. Um, Give that some thought so you can really harvest now and enjoy that harvest and also preserve that harvest, but don't feel like you have to wait until the end of the year to do all of that. Do it early, do it often, do it throughout the whole season so that it doesn't become a lot of work, and just let it be your lifestyle. Let it be the way that you approach gardening and you approach food preservation, and you'll find like there's a lot less stress to that because you can just do it any old time that you have the time. Like you can go out any day and thin the beets and save those beet leaves and feel like, okay, I'm rocking it. I've already started preserving Harvest 2020. Um, so keep that in mind. Start early. And yeah, so if you want more information on freezer cooking, again, I have an entire course that goes through how to freeze vegetables. This is just one portion of it, but also how to do entire freezer meals. I have an entire website that is dedicated just to freezing food. You can come check that out at favoritefreezerfoods.com. There's links there to sign up for email. You can get your freezer inventory list, which you want to use and update every time you add anything to your freezer. Yeah, so that's what I wanted to share with you guys. And happy gardening this year. It's going to be a really great year for gardening and for gardeners to come together. So I'm very excited to see so many people out there gardening this year. I don't know what the world's going to bring. I won't even fathom to guess, but it will be a phenomenal year for those of us who are staying home and growing and preserving our own food. So I will see you guys. Thanks so much and enjoy your gardens.